Science, the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world, following a systematic methodology based on evidence. To simplify, it is the study of the nature and behavior of natural things and the knowledge that we obtain about them. Don't get it? Well, in a nutshell, science is the study of the world around us. We learn about a specific subject by observing, describing, and experimenting. According to Albert Einstein, the goal of scientific pursuit shall not be merely to make use of the world around us. It should be to understand it, fundamentally.
Now let's ask the question, why should we study science? Science is one of the most important channels of knowledge. Creating new knowledge, improving education, and increasing the quality of our lives are the benefits of science. Thus, science must respond to the social needs and the global challenges of humanity.
In short, science is a necessity. Science makes humanity a step closer to consumer advancement. Therefore, it forms the reason why we should learn science.
Want to learn more about science? Join us as we learn and tackle the subject science. Here only at Stark Management.
Hello, students and viewers. Before proceeding to our discussion, I, the CEO and main editor of this video, would like to make a short announcement. We sincerely apologize for uploading this video late. We decided to move the uploading date of this video due to other assessments trying to eat us for lunch. Just kidding. Anyways, I would like to thank you for the continuous support you had been giving us. Expect the following video to be more enjoyable than before. We had to make this a short one because we are running out of time to edit the video and this is the only thing we have to accomplish, so... Nonetheless, enjoy the video and thank you very much. Also, expect me to pop in and pop outs. Yeah.
Bawat bata may tanong.
Our first lesson is all about the scientific ways of acquiring knowledge and solving problems. The comprehensive definition of science is it is a method of thinking and gathering accurate and reliable knowledge about the world. It is the quest to understand and improve our knowledge of the world as well as how and why things work.
Science, through a scientific method, can build on prior knowledge and acquire more comprehensive understanding of certain subjects over time. The scientific method consists of 6 steps. Let's discuss each step thoroughly. The first step is to make observations. Look around you. Does something make you curious? Does something seem strange to you? Do you wonder what causes something or why something happens? After your observation, the second step would be to ponder several knowledge-worthy, researchable questions that will later pinpoint your objectives. Have you asked yourself, why is the sky blue? Why do we dream? Is water even wet?
Why does my crush not like me?
Well, you know what? It is a good question. We do not discriminate questions here. It can be for personal growth or development. But continuing, the possibilities for observation and questions are endless. And it's up to you and me. It's up to us to ask.
After your observation and developing your questions, you may start developing a hypothesis. A hypothesis is not simply a guess. A hypothesis is an educated guess or a tentative answer to a problem. It is a preliminary answer to the questions you have asked earlier that you will test to see if it seems to be true. It usually predicts a relationship between 2 or more variables.
Variables in an experiment may be independent or dependent. The variable that is being controlled is called an independent variable. The dependent variable changes because of a test. It is the effect that arises from the changes in the independent variable.
After creating your hypothesis and distinguishing the independent and dependent variables, now is the time to test your developed hypothesis. You will need to design and conduct an experiment to identify whether the null hypothesis can be rejected or approved. Remember, when rejecting the null hypothesis, you approve the alternate hypothesis or vice versa. Hence, you must create a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. To add, recording the experiment will be extremely beneficial. By recording, you will be able to analyze the result. Analyze if your prediction was accurate. If not, state the reason or reasons why.
Finally, draw your conclusions. The conclusion will include your hypothesis, experiment, and results. The conclusion will serve as the final answer to your problem or experiment.
To conclude, the scientific method is a powerful tool that can be used to answer a wide range of problems or questions and takes us closer to the truth. It lays forth a step-by-step process for standardizing how scientific information is acquired, ensuring correctness, consistency, and validity. Let's proceed to our next lesson, which is about the seasons and eclipses. Let us define the word season. A season is any of 4 divisions of the year according to consistent annual changes in the weather. The 4 seasons, if you remember, are spring, summer, fall, and winter.
When we were in grade 6, we tracked the weather for the whole school year and found out that there are only 2 seasons in the Philippines, which are rainy and dry. But did you know that there is no summer here in the Philippines? Instead, the Philippines have a hot, dry season. According to Pag-asa, there is no summer season here in the Philippines, or in any other country in the tropical zone or those near the equator like the Philippines.
Summer is only experienced in temperate regions such as Northern Asia, Europe, the United States, and Australia. Their summers are characterized by warm temperatures and dry conditions. Astronomically, summers have significantly longer daytimes than nighttimes.
Additionally, summer in the Northern Hemisphere started on June 21 this year, which is marked by the summer solstice, the day the sun appears highest in the sky. But on the other side of the world, in Australia and the rest of the Southern Hemisphere, summer starts on December 21 this year.
Possibly, you may observe that different kinds of weather changes over a year. But have you ever wondered why the seasons change? The answer can be found in the way the Earth moves in relation to the Sun. The Earth's axis is an imaginary line running between the North and South poles. Each day, the Earth makes one full rotation on its axis. This rotation takes 24 hours, which we call one day. While the Earth is busy turning daily circles, it is also traveling along a giant oval path around the Sun. This path is called Earth's orbit. It takes our planet 365 days to make one complete trip around the Sun. In fact, that trip around the Sun is how we define 1 year. As the Earth orbits the Sun, it is slightly tilted on its axis. The tilt means that on any given day, the Earth is slightly pointed toward or away from the Sun. Depending on where you're standing on Earth, there are times your half of the world, called a hemisphere, is pointed toward the Sun. At other times, your hemisphere is pointed away from the Sun. As the Earth travels around the Sun over a course of a year and the tilt of its axis points your hemisphere toward or away from the Sun, thus, you experience the changing of the seasons. Now, are also wondering, how does the length of daytime and nighttime affects the season? Let me explain simply how it works. Daytime is roughly the period on any given point of the planet's surface which experiences natural illumination from indirect or especially direct sunlight. On the other hand, nighttime stands from the period of time between the sunset and the sunrise when the sun is below the horizon. The Earth's rotation occurs from east to west, which is why the sun always appears to be rising on the eastern horizon and set on the western. The Earth rotates once in about 24 hours with respect to the sun. Sometimes it's 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4 seconds due to the star's formation. Due to the Earth's axial tilt or obliquity, day and night are not evenly divided. If the Earth's axis were perpendicular to its orbital plane around the sun, all places on Earth will experience equal amounts of day and night every day during the year, and there will be no seasonal variability. Instead, at any given time of the year, one hemisphere is pointed slightly more towards the sun, leaving the other pointed away. During this time, one hemisphere will be experiencing warmer temperatures and longer days, while the other will experience colder temperatures and longer nights.
Let us now learn about eclipses. Whether solar or lunar, an eclipse happens when the sun, moon, and earth align with each other. A solar eclipse, like the one on August 21, 2017, is when the sun's light will be blocked by the moon. Either total or partial, solar eclipses happen twice every year. There are 4 types of solar eclipses: total, partial, annual, and hybrid.
First, total solar eclipses happen when the sun is completely blocked by the moon and only visible from a specific part of the Earth. Second, partial solar eclipses occur when the moon does not completely cover the sun. The moon passes off-center and only a portion of the sun is obscured.
Third, the annular eclipse is when the moon doesn't cover the entirety of the sun, even if the moon is completely centered in front of it. This happens because the moon's orbit is an ellipsis and the moon is closer to the Earth. Lastly, the hybrid eclipse, which is a combination of a total and an annular eclipse. It starts as one type and transitions to another.
It is said that some people believe that a sudden darkening during the day or the solar eclipse brings bad luck. Others say that it is also bad luck when the moon turns dark during the full moon or the lunar eclipse. But the question arises if these beliefs regarding eclipses are true. Does a Bakunawa cause eclipses?
Great question, Angeli. In science, explanations are supported with evidence. Beliefs related to eclipses, such as the sun being swallowed by Bakunawa, a large animal, or even the increase in harmful microorganisms during an eclipse, are being passed on by adults to young children. And up until now, no proof says they're true.
Let us first learn about Isaac Newton. He is an English mathematician, physicist, astronomer, theologian, and author who is widely recognized as one of the greatest mathematicians and most influential scientists of all time, and he is also a key figure in the scientific revolution. He is very famous for his discovery of the law of gravity and the 3 laws of motion. Motion is the action or process of moving or being moved. The principle behind Newton's laws of motion is very significant in understanding the motion of objects in our universe, and helps us understand why the things around us move or behave the way they do.
Newton's first law of motion, the law of inertia, states that an object in motion tends to stay in motion and object at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. A perfect example is a soccer ball sitting at rest. It takes an unbalanced force of a kick to change its motion. Another example could be this one.
Seriously?
The second law of motion, the law of acceleration, states that force is equal to mass times acceleration. It means that the force is directly proportional to mass and acceleration. An example of this is something very small that is changing speed very quickly, like a bullet, can still have a great force.
The third law of motion, the law of interaction, states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, which means that for every force acting on an object, there's an equal force acting in the opposite direction. It's like a mirror per se, or reflection of force.
The following lesson that we will discuss is potential energy and kinetic energy. Let us first focus on potential energy. Potential energy is the energy possessed by a body by virtue of its position relative to others, stresses within itself, electric charge, and other factors. The formula for potential energy is U is equals to mgh.
Furthermore, the formula for potential energy depends on the force acting on the 2 objects. For the gravitational force, the formula is Pe is equals to mgh, where m is the mass in kilograms. G is the acceleration due to gravity, or 9.8 meters divided by s to the power of 2 at the surface of the Earth, and h is the height in meters.
There are 5 types of potential energy, which are mechanical, chemical, electric, gravitational, and elastic energy. Here are the following examples for each kind of potential energy.
The first type is mechanical energy. While the potential energy of an object is combined with its kinetic energy, it results in mechanical energy. An example could be a moving car or a hammer applying force to a nail. The second type is chemical energy. It occurs when energy is released during a chemical reaction. Potential chemical energy is the energy stored in the bonds of these chemicals, ready to react with another chemical. Possible examples could be a charged battery, explosives, green leaves before the sun shines on them, or potential photosynthesis, or gasoline before it is ignited. The third type is electric energy. It is energy derived as a result of the movement of electrons. When you see a light switch that is off, you can't see the charge that's waiting to flow through the wires. That's just one example of electric potential energy. Others could be an incandescent light bulb that is turned off, your car's headlights before they are turned on, a radio tower that is not working, or a cell phone that is turned off. The fourth type is gravitational energy. It is the potential energy a massive object has in relation to another massive object due to gravity. When something has a high position, its gravitational potential energy is high, then it shows gravitational potential energy. Examples are a raised weight, water that is behind a dam, a car that is parked at the top of a hill, or a yo-yo before it is released. The fifth type is elastic energy. It is the mechanical potential energy stored in the configuration of a material or physical system as it is subjected to elastic deformation by work performed upon it. The material an item is made of can affect its potential energy as well. An elastic ball has higher elasticity than a bowling ball. Therefore, it will bounce higher with the same amount of force. Examples are a coiled spring, a stretched rubber band, and soccer balls before a player kicks them.
Let's shift our focus to kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is a property of a moving object or particle and depends not only on its motion, but also on its mass. The formula for kinetic energy is directly proportional to the mass of the object and to the square of its velocity. The formula is kinetic energy is equals to 1 divided by 2 multiplied to the mass multiplied to the velocity to the power of 2.
Additional information: if the mass has units of kilograms and the velocity of meters per second, the kinetic energy has units of kilograms meters squared per second squared. There are 5 types of kinetic energy: radiant, thermal, sound, electrical, and mechanical. Let's explore several kinetic energy examples to better illustrate these various forms.
The first type is radiant energy. It is a type of kinetic energy referring to energy that travels by waves or particles. The second type is thermal energy. This energy is associated with the random motions of the molecules of a material or object. This is similar to radiant energy because both can be experienced in the form of heat or warmth. The third type is sound energy. These are the physical vibration waves that travel through the air to reach the ears, signaling the brain to interpret incoming sound.
The fourth type is electrical energy. This is caused by the flow of negatively charged electrons around circuit. It is the bare moment of these electrons that powers our everyday devices.
Lastly, the fifth type is mechanical energy. It is literally the energy associated with the mechanical movement of an object. The more and faster the object moves, the more mechanical energy it has and the more ability it has to do work.
Now, we're going to discuss the respiratory system. The respiratory system is the major reason why you're breathing right now. It protects your airways from harmful substances and irritants and also delivers oxygen to the cells in your body. As we dig down, what exactly is the respiratory system? How does it clean our body's oxygen? Well, the respiratory system is the network of organs and tissues that help you breathe. It includes your airways, lungs, and blood vessels. Like networks, it also has parts that work together to move oxygen throughout the body and clean out waste gases like carbon dioxide.
To continue, let's get down to learning each part and discuss what is their function and why is it important for the human body and as a part of the respiratory system.
What are the parts of the respiratory system? When we breathe air, it will go down with the 3 major parts of the respiratory system. The so-called airway, which includes the nose, mouth, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. Then, of course, the main character of the entire system, the lungs, and its support system or the muscle of respiration, the diaphragm that is in charge of carrying air between the lungs and the body's exterior. Wow, that's a lot. You better hear me out, for we are going on a speedrun adventure in learning about the respiratory system. Well, here it is. Moving on to the circulatory system. Just kidding, we're gonna do this video unless the contents are complete and the video must be short. So let's start our journey towards the respiratory system. The first stop is the nose or nasal cavity. This is where the first and main external opening for the respiratory system and first body section through which air moves. This is also an opening that pulls and pushes air in and out of your body and the respiratory system. Second comes the mouth or oral cavity. It serves its purpose as the second option but only when needed since most normal breathing happens in the nasal cavity and the mouth mostly serves for the purpose of digestion. It serves the same purpose as the nose or nasal cavity, where it pulls and pushes air in and out of your body and the respiratory system. The one advantage of breathing air through the mouth is that its shorter distance and larger diameter allow more air to quickly enter the body. Next, sinuses. Before entering the pharynx, the sinuses produce mucus that moisturizes the inside of the nose. The mucus layer protects the nose from pollutants, microorganisms, dust, and dirt. There are also the hollow areas between the bones in your head that help regulate the temperature and humidity of the air you inhale. Air exiting the body through the nose returns moisture and heat to the nasal cavity before being exhaled into the environment. Now, the pharynx. Also known as the throat, it is a muscular funnel that extends from the posterior end of the nasal cavity to the superior end of the esophagus and larynx. This tube delivers air from your mouth and nose to the trachea, or windpipe. The pharynx is divided into 3 regions that have their own unique abilities. The first region, nasopharynx, lies just above the soft part of the roof of the mouth and just behind the nasal passages. It is the upper part of the throat that lies behind the nose. It is the superior region of the pharynx found in the posterior of the nasal cavity. Inhaled air from the nasal cavity passes into the nasopharynx and descends through the oropharynx. The second region, oropharynx, serves both the respiratory and digestive systems. The oropharynx is the most critical region in swallowing and joins the oral cavity and nasopharynx with the larynx, and it is located in the posterior of the oral cavity, and air inhaled through the oral cavity enters the pharynx through the oropharynx. Lastly, the third region, laryngopharynx, is where both food and air pass. It inhales air then descends into the laryngopharynx, where it is diverted into the opening of the larynx by the epiglottis. Now that we have finally learned the functions of the pharynx and why is it important to divide the food we consume and the air we breathe, what exactly is epiglottis? And how does it serve to be functional to the 3 major regions of the pharynx? Let's ask my friend over there. Well, why did you ask me? Just kidding. What is epiglottis exactly? The epiglottis ensures that air passes into the trachea by covering the opening to the esophagus. During the process of swallowing, the epiglottis moves to cover the trachea to ensure that food enters the esophagus and to prevent choking. Isn't it cool? To continue from the pharynx, the next part is the larynx. The larynx is a hollow organ that allows you to talk and make sounds when air moves in and out. It is also the short section of the airway that connects the laryngopharynx and the trachea. The larynx is in the interior portion of the neck, just inferior to the hyoid bone and superior to the trachea. Some cartilage makes up the larynx and gives it a structure, and what includes it is the epiglottis, which serves as the cover of the larynx as the person swallows his or her food. To add, the thyroid cartilage serves as one of the covers that hold open the anterior end of the larynx and protects the vocal folds. This is also known as the Adam's apple, which appears mostly on males. Moving on, the trachea is the passage of the throat to the lungs. This is a 5-inch long tube made of C-shaped hyaline cartilage rings lined with pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Fun fact, did you know that the trachea is lined with the most mucous membrane layer composed of cells containing small hair-like projections called cilia? Cilia are the tiny hairs that move in a wave-like motion to filter dust and other irritants out of your airways. Imagine the seaweed that are seen in the sea. That kind of unique movement is how the cilia moves inside the body. At the end of the trachea are the bronchial tubes. These are the tubes that connect the bottom windpipe to the lungs. Bronchial tubes connects 2 primary bronchi which are on the left side and right side. Then these 2 primary bronchi will connect to the secondary bronchi. The secondary bronchi carry air into the lobes of the lungs, 2 in the left lung and 3 in the right lung. The secondary bronchi in turn split into many smaller tertiary bronchi within each lobe. The tertiary bronchi split into many smaller bronchioles that spread throughout the lungs. The bronchi and bronchioles carry the air from the trachea to the lungs. Of what we know, the lungs clean up the air we breathe and let out the waste. But it's actually more than that, and it has a lot of parts to help it do with the process. The lungs is a pair of large, spongy organs found in the thorax lateral to the heart and superior to the diaphragm. Its main function is to help oxygen from the air we breathe to enter the red cells in the body. Red blood cells then carry oxygen around the body to be used by all the cells found in our body. The lungs also help the body to get rid of CO2 gas when we breathe out.
Hello there! Fun fact. The negative pressure allows the lungs to passively fill with air as they relax. The left lung and the right lung are slightly different in size and shape due to the heart pointing to the left side of the body. The left lung is therefore slightly smaller than the right lung and is made up of 2 lobes, while the right lung is made out of 3 lobes. Since the internal of lungs is considered spongy, it consists of spongy tissues containing many capillaries and around 30 million tiny sacs known as alveoli.
What are alveoli? Well, alveoli are the tiny air sacs in the lungs where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. These are cup-shaped structures found at the end of the terminal bronchioles and surrounded by capillaries. Capillaries are blood vessels in the alveoli walls that move oxygen and carbon dioxide and are in charge of the connections between the veins and arteries to bring the oxygenated blood to the heart. And lastly, the diaphragm is the major muscle of respiration. This relaxes as the air is pushed out of the lungs. It also has some non-respiratory functions as well. Was that too fast?
Now that we have managed to know and realize what are the main functions of the respiratory system that gives life to us, let's get down to knowing what on the circulatory system, where we receive the oxygen and give life to us, considering that the heart gives life to our body.
First of all, what is the circulatory system? The circulatory system, also called the cardiovascular system or vascular system, transports oxygen, nutrients, and hormones to your body cells to use for energy, growth, and repair. The circulatory system helps to fight off disease, helps the body maintain a normal body temperature, and provides the right chemical balance to provide the body's homeostasis or the state of balance among all its systems. There are four major components of the circulatory system, namely the heart, the arteries, the veins, and the blood. The first major component, which is the heart, is about the size of two adult hands held together. The heart rests near the center of the chest. It is also a muscular organ that pumps blood to all parts of your body. The second major component, the arteries, carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart and where it needs to go. There are two types of arteries, the pulmonary and systemic arteries. The pulmonary arteries transport blood that has a low oxygen content from the right ventricle to the lungs, and the systemic arteries transport oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the body tissues, which includes the aorta, which is the largest artery in the body. The third major component, veins, carries blood toward the heart. After blood passes through the capillaries, it enters the smallest veins called venules. From the venules, it flows into progressively larger and larger veins until it reaches the heart. And the last major component, the blood. It's made up of cells and plasma. It transports almost everything within the body, whether it be waste or nutrients, just like the delivery system in real life. It transports hormones, nutrients, oxygen, antibodies, and other important things that needs to keep our body healthy. There are two types of blood cells, the red blood cells and the white blood cells. The red blood cells transport oxygen to your body's organs and tissues, and the white blood cells help your body fight infections. White blood cells are bigger than red blood cells and normally are fewer in number. After knowing the major component of the circulatory system, let's further explore the major and the head of the circulatory system, the heart. The heart has a wall composed of three layers, namely the outer layer, the epicardium, which is a thin layer, the middle layer, myocardium, which is a thick layer, it's thick because of the cardiac muscle fibers, and the innermost layer, the endocardium, which is a thin layer. The heart pumps blood through the network of arteries and veins, and it has four chambers. The right atrium receives blood from the veins and pumps it to the right ventricle. Then the right ventricle receives blood from the right atrium and pumps it into the lungs, where it is loaded with oxygen. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs and pumps it to the left ventricle. Then the left ventricle, the strongest chamber, pumps oxygen-rich blood to the rest of the body. The left ventricle's vigorous contractions create our blood pressure. Now, let's discuss the veins and arteries that are connected to the lungs. The pulmonary arteries carry blood from the right side of the heart to the lungs. To add, there are blood vessels that carry blood from the right side of the heart to the capillaries of the lungs. Furthermore, it moves the oxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. The pulmonary veins are blood vessels that transfer freshly oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atria of the heart. Moreover, they transport oxygenated blood back to the heart from the lungs. Out of all the arteries, what is the most important artery, you might ask? Well, it is the aorta. The aorta is the largest artery in the body and is important because it gives the body access to oxygen-rich blood that it needs to survive. The oxygen-rich blood travels through the aorta, making a cane-shaped curve that allows other major arteries to deliver oxygen-rich blood to the brain, muscles, and other cells. It's like the boss of the arteries or the battery for arteries to work. Now that we know the chambers, let's discuss the veins and valves that connect from the heart to our entire body. There are four valves in order of circulation, and these are the tricuspid, pulmonary, mitral, and aortic. The tricuspid valve separates the top right chamber from the bottom right chamber. It opens to allow blood to flow from the right atrium to the right ventricle and prevents the backflow of blood from the right ventricle to the right atrium. The pulmonary valve, also called the pulmonic valve, separates the right ventricle from the pulmonary artery. It opens to allow blood to be pumped from the right ventricle to the lungs, where it will receive oxygen and prevents the backflow of blood from the pulmonary artery to the right ventricle. The mitral valve separates the top left chamber from the bottom left chamber. It opens to allow blood to flow from the left atrium to the left ventricle and prevents the backflow of blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium. The aortic valve separates the left ventricle from the aorta. It opens to allow blood to leave the heart from the left ventricle through the aorta and the body. Moreover, it prevents the backflow of blood from the aorta to the left ventricle.
When scientists discovered Gregor Mendel's work on the basics of genetics, it was hailed as a major breakthrough. For the first time, scientists could reliably predict and describe what was happening when two organisms with known traits were bred to produce offspring. Things were going great, not until scientists noticed that something funny was happening. Not all the traits that they predicted in test crosses panned out as expected. This story brings us to the non-Mendelian inheritance.
Non-Mendelian genetics is basically any inheritance pattern that don't follow one or more laws of Mendelian genetics.
The following are the 3 laws of Mendelian genetics. Mendel's first law, the law of segregation, states that a parent who has 2 alleles for a gene can only pass on 1 allele or the other to each offspring. Mendel's second law, the law of independent assortment, states that 2 or more traits are inherited separately from each other. They don't always occur together. Mendel's third law, the law of dominance, states that one dominant allele will take charge over a recessive allele and mask it. The only way recessive alleles can be seen is if an individual possesses 2 copies of the recessive allele. These are the basic rules of Mendelian genetics. But as scientists began exploring more and more test crosses, they found tons of traits that didn't match up nicely with what these laws predicted.
Some traits exhibited a kind of blending, where the offspring of organisms with 2 different traits didn't have one or the other form from the parents. They had something that was sort of in the middle. This implies that certain alleles aren't dominant over the other ones. Rather, they share roles like homogeneous friends.
Non-Mendelian inheritance patterns might just be caused by mistakes in reproduction. There are a ton of different processes all happening together like a coordinated dance, and all it takes is one thing to trip or mess up and the whole thing goes haywire. There are so many things that could go wrong that frankly it is a wonder that we all ended up here in one piece. Isn't it mind-blowing that one single sperm could turn out to be such a disappointment?
Ha, we're just kidding. Now we are going to talk about codominance. Codominance occurs when the alleles for a particular trait are codominant. They are both expressed equally rather than a dominant allele taking complete control over a recessive allele. This means that when an organism has 2 different alleles, being heterozygous for a hair color could mean that you have one allele for a red hair and one allele for the brown hair. It will express both at the same time.
Have you ever seen speckled flowers? This is a common case of codominance, where the plant breeder has bred 2 different colors of the flower together, resulting in a speckled hybrid that has patches of color from both parents. One really good example of this in humans is blood type. The most important blood type is the ABO system, since receiving a blood transfusion with a different blood type from yours will result in an automatic death because of a thing called autoimmune response.
The A and B blood types are codominant. Thus, if 2 people with AA and BB blood type alleles have children, it will look like this. In this case, every single child, male or female from this couple, will be heterozygotes. Both alleles will be expressed equally, meaning that every blood cell in their little bodies will both have A antigens and B antigens present. One allele is not dominant over the other in this case. We all know that in humans, the sex chromosomes are the X chromosome and Y chromosome. Hence, a sex-linked gene may occur in either of these sex chromosomes. Since the X chromosome is a rather large structure than the Y chromosome, the X chromosome carries more genes, which may not be found in Y chromosomes. Thus, there are more sex-linked genes found in the X than in the Y chromosome.
DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is a long molecule that contains our unique genetic code. Like a recipe book, It holds the instructions for making all the proteins in our bodies. Human DNA is made up of around 3 billion base pairs, and more than 99% of these bases are the same in everyone.
Similar to the way the order of letters in the alphabet can be used to form words, the order of nitrogen bases in a DNA sequence forms genes, which, in the language of the cell, tells cells how to make a lot of things, including our proteins. The shorthand for this process is that genes encode proteins, and DNA is considered a direct template for protein production. To make a protein, the cell makes a copy of the gene that is in the DNA using the 3 forms of RNA or ribonucleic acid. This RNA form that transcribes a DNA template called messenger RNA journeys to the cell's protein-making machinery, which are the ribosomes, to string together the amino acids in a process called protein synthesis. They make use of rRNA and tRNA, which both stands for ribosomal RNA and transfer RNA, to help the ribosomes create the proteins. Once the process is complete, a protein is made. Basically, DNA is the code of the body to make its entire appearance similar to how programmers make their programs, while the RNA is in charge of making our body's proteins that are in charge of making our body healthy, help us grow, and repair our damaged cells.
Hey, Stark Management, Gabriel here. So, in the intro part of this video, I said that I'm going to be popping in and popping out, and that will be now because I got tired and lazy of editing the video because it was too long, it took too much time, and actually we should be uploading this last 6 p.m. But yeah, we couldn't do it because it's too much scenes to cover, too much chroma key, and too much stuff to do, color grading, and yeah, it's nerd stuff. But instead, don't worry, I'll be including here the pointers and things that you must point out that will be included in the Brainteaser. Also, that will be all. Now to the end part of this video.
This marks the end of our Let's Learn Episode 2 Science. Thank you very much for watching this video, and we, the people of Stark, really appreciate our students and viewers for supporting our program.
If you loved our content, we encourage you to like, share, and subscribe for us to get a very high grade in our subject. Yes, it is required, mandatory. I know, college rank, am I right? Well, here are our social media accounts. If you're interested to, follow, share, help us get grades. And we help you getting knowledge. It's a fair trade, isn't it? No? Okay.
For our students, the feedback form link will be seen in the description or caption part of this video. I hope you learned a lot today.
See you again next time, only on
Stark Management.
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 Stay safe and may God bless us all. Thank you.